Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in the country. We're so glad to have you joining us today. My name is Katie McCullough, and I'm with the Early Childhood TA Center and the Daisy Center. I'm joined by a wealth of folks here with expertise around practice-based coaching, and that includes Katasha Williams from the North Carolina Early Learning Network, Ted Bovey from the Pele Center, University of Denver. We don't have Phil today, but Ted's a great stand-in. He'll do great. We have Susan Sandahl from Early Edu Alliance of the University of Washington, and Leslie Janes also from the Early Edu Alliance at the University of Washington. So welcome. Before we get started in these concepts around system supports for virtual coaching, we thought it was important to get grounded and ensure shared understanding about what we mean by practice-based coaching. And probably many of you are familiar with this, but we want to just touch base on some of these conceptual components. So practice-based coaching really works from a foundational piece or component around collaborative partnerships between the coach and the coachee. From there, there's shared goals and action planning, which comes from needs assessment data, which then drives the identification of those shared goals and action planning. From there, the team moves into focused observation around an identified select group of practices identified as part of the shared goals and action planning, but collects that data and uses that information in the next component, which is reflection and feedback. And that includes both supportive and constructive feedback from the coach to the coachee. And this is an ongoing cycle that continues to inform and be revised as needed to refine those practices, the implementation of those practices at Fidelity to improve outcomes for children and potentially families, depending on your system and your focus. So practice-based coaching is a cyclical process for supporting teachers, providers, practitioners, use of effective practices that lead to positive outcomes. Coaching can be provided through various formats. You can coach yourself in terms of following this cyclical process. You can have peer coaching with a colleague or expert coaching, someone who has expertise on the selected practices that are being worked on. In terms of proximity, practice-based coaching can be delivered through distance or virtual, which we'll be focusing on today, or in person. Regarding group size, it could be individual, one-on-one, or in a group setting. And we'll hear some examples of communities of practice or other types of group ways to implement practice-based coaching. When we're talking about system supports, we're really thinking about, in a lot of ways, the infrastructure components that are reflective in the ECTA and DAISY system framework. Those might be, in terms of governance, you might be refining agreements around practice-based coaching and those arrangements with your coaches or professional development network. You could be addressing financing, about how you're going to fund various virtual platforms. Personnel workforce is probably where you're primarily focused in terms of ensuring that you have the capacity to provide distance or virtual coaching. But maybe you're attending to pieces around your data system in terms of how to collect and use virtual coaching data through observation. Your accountability and quality improvement in terms of how you're using that data from coaching, interactions between coach and coachee to improve your system, and the integration of quality standards as part of your coaching process. We also wanted to remind you all about the statewide implementation guide, or SIG, which is available on the ECTA webpage, which details these 4 essential support structures of state leadership team, professional development network, which would include your coaches, your implementation and demonstration sites, and your evaluation and use of data So there's several tools and resources in here, including the benchmarks of quality that could be used to help drive your planning around these infrastructure supports. Before I go on, we wanted to do a quick poll to gauge the extent to which, how long your system has been engaged in coaching, whether it's practice-based coaching or another form of coaching. So Roxanne, if you could pull up that poll. So you can see the question is, how long has your system been implementing practice-based coaching? Maybe you're considering it, but not yet implementing. Less than a year, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, 6 to 10, or more than 10. All right, there's a little bit of movement going through. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and show, let me share the results. Oh, thanks, Roxanne. It looks like most of you are considering, but not yet implementing. And then followed next, we're tied with 1 to 2 years to 3 to 5, and some 6 to 10, and one more than 10 years. So really nice distribution actually in the group. Thanks so much for sharing your thoughts on that. We also wanted to be sure to mention that the National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations is hosting a webinar coming up on November 4th at 3 p.m. Eastern on coaching in the virtual world. So that will really emphasize supports, strategies for your coaches in this current climate of virtual coaching. So we thought that might be a webinar you guys would be interested in and wanted to be sure you had that information. On that note, I'm going to pass it over to Katasha Williams, who's going to share with you about their experience in North Carolina in implementing virtual coaching. Katasha?
Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. I am Katasha Williams, and I work with a project called the North Carolina Early Learning Network. And this project is housed at UNC Frank Porter Graham Child Development Institute. However, we are funded by our department, our State Department of Education, using 619 set-aside dollars. So we have been implementing the pyramid model since 2013 as a project. So during our time together today, just want to walk you through our process of looking at our infrastructure and making some leadership decisions based on where we found ourselves with COVID and really shifting to virtual supports for our coaches. So just a little background about where we are in North Carolina. Currently, we have 38 school districts who participate in our pyramid project for preschool. And in those 38 school districts, we have 529 teachers who are actively being coached to meet fidelity or being coached to maintain fidelity. And all of that work is being done by 251 active coaches in our state. The one thing I want to point out here, the distribution of coaches in our state, is that each district operates in a different way. I mean, it's various across the state. And we have very few, if any, coaches who are full-time practice-based coaches. Rather, in our state, many of our coaches are also classroom teachers or classroom support staff. Oftentimes, our coaches are administrators, coordinators, and some are assessment team members. So I say that to say that as we navigated working in this remote teaching and learning environment, it really added a lot of additional responsibility to everyone's role. So we had to frame our approach looking at that. We could not ignore that. So we'll move to the next slide, please. As with all of our initiatives at the Early Learning Network, we use implementation science. We're not going to spend a lot of time here. Katie, thank you so much for queuing us up, because in that implementation science framework, we are heavy on the essential support structures, they're in place, as well as just the systems that are needed to maintain fidelity. And really through all of this, it has been a great help to us as we had to make these quick shifts on our project to better support the field. So as we walk through where North Carolina has been and where we are, you'll hear mention of competency drivers, and those are just things such as our PD structure, how we organize PD in our state. Also, the component of organizational drivers, how we use data, how we set up environments for success. And all of that is flanked by our leadership drivers, those decisions such as looking at infrastructure supports and making quick shifts. So we'll talk some about that as we go through this presentation. On this slide, you'll see a graphic. It's a diagram of our competency drivers. So again, all those supports that we give to our practice-based coaches normally, right? So we support them with required PD events. Those are those things you see there in green. Things such as the pyramid trainings, mindful coaching, TPOT reliability. They're probably all familiar to you if you're thinking about implementing coaching using the pyramid model. We also have some ongoing support. So the green is what is required to become a coach in our state. And then the purple is how we, as a network of program coaches, support the practice-based coaches. So you'll see things there like coaches meetings, times for them to come together throughout the year. Also pairing with an experienced coach, our listserv, things of that nature there. And I bring that up because over the course of time in North Carolina, we have really put the coach at the center of our focus for trainings. And you'll see that most of our PD offerings here were intended for face-to-face consumption. So that's what further complicated things as we were thrown into the world of COVID and COVID school closures. So COVID forced us, just like everyone else, to take a closer look. We had to look really intently at those packages of PD. And when I say we, it was meetings with our leadership team, our network of program coaches, and our funder at the forefront of these conversations. And what became clear to us is that as the way we were organized, we could not just plop those, and I say just, I shouldn't say that, but we couldn't in real time and make a quick shift to taking a 2 or 3 day PD event, putting it on Zoom, and being able to ensure the fidelity of practice that we were accustomed to being able to do and that those offerings that we provided previously. As we explore this, and we can move to the next slide, as we begin to explore, there were certainly many moments of uncertainty. I mean, we at times had more questions than answers, right? We began to really look at our scope of work. Because we're a project that's funded, we have deliverables that we have to carry out each year. We also begin to look at coaching logs. We host an online system that house all the coaching logs, TPOTs, scoring, all those things in our state. And what we did was we used that coaching log as data to start to drive our decisions on what was happening. Well, actually, it put our finger at the pulse of what was happening in real time post-COVID school closures. And we used that information to begin to drive our decisions on where we were to go next in our state, because we were really bound, like most programs, thinking, okay, how in the world are we going to pull out TPOTs? How are we going to do that in this virtual world? When and where? What does that look like? So all of that data really informed us. And again, having that systems framework in place was invaluable for us to be able to move forward without compromising the success of our implementation. What became clear to us is that we needed to take care and be really explicit about responding to the needs of the field. From that data collection, we also started to complete needs assessments and needs analysis. So in your session folder, there is a copy of 2 of our analysis reports that we've completed as a state. Not only do we look at the needs of the field, we look at our resources as well, and all of that is there for you. And as we began going through the needs analysis, coaches in our state were telling us that, wow, we're getting a lot of information. We feel supported. There are a lot of webinars going on. There are a lot of resources available to us. But what we need now is some really practical strategies to put our coaching to work in a virtual environment. So what we did is we began to think about, first, how do we close out the 1920 school year? It was abruptly interrupted, if you will, but we still wanted to be able to collect and report on that good, rich data that had been collected up into March and sometimes past March. So how do we close out the school year? And then how do we move forward? So we begin to look at August to January in our planning. Sorry, my daughter just came in holding her tooth. Sorry, that's the word we're in right now, right? You talk about interruptions. I'm so sorry. From that, we had our needs assessment really came into our key priorities being lifted up. For our state, our number one priority was to develop and maintain our strong network of coaches, because we know that from there comes our implementation. We also began to think about how to leverage what's already available. You know, there were so many new things, but we thought what we grounded in was in implementation science and evidence-based practices, how we knew them. So how could we leverage these? So what we developed was a quarterly coaching webinar. So this is a series that we had always provided to our coaches, but in the time of supporting them through virtual coaching, we really start to shape these on thinking through how to leverage and establish a collaborative partnership in remote learning environments. So we are very specific and intentional there about the resources and the supports that we provided. And we've already had 2 of those webinars this year. We had one, well, actually we had one in September, and we've already planned the one for December. The other offering that we made available were monthly coaching community of practices. And this is something that we had not provided for our coaches, not with this level of intensity. So each month we have our active coaches meet, and as program coaches, our project staff, we facilitate the conversations. But the work really is about the coaches coming together for that peer coaching, the celebration of successes and challenges, and sharing of resources. And we have received so much great feedback. And we thought that we would just do this over the course of 4 months to kind of get things going, but our coaches are already asking us for more. They really have appreciated this time together. So we can move to the next slide. Through those key priorities, what have come to surface for us is that the program-based coaches are receiving guidance on their practices and how to provide coaching support remotely. They're learning from each other through peer and group coaching support. That is something that has really been an opportunity for us through all of this. And they're also receiving those resources that help them, because many of them are educators as well. So the other thing I want to add is at the end of each of our offerings, the community of practice and the quarterly webinar, again, that data is so useful for us. We don't plan these in advance. Rather, we ask them at the end, tell us what you need more of to be successful. And it is from what we receive and glean from them that we then build the next offering and layer the supports that way. So as a state, we have really found, and we believe that the relative strength of the coach has a significant impact on the teacher's performance and implementation. So we really spend a lot of our energy building that coaching capacity there. So just a couple of things. I really wish that we had a magic sauce or, you know, some magic to give you, but what we really landed on is not very magical at all. It is just our approach from the standpoint of how do we leverage our existing practices, concepts, and strategies. And what we've done is we've landed on doing that by way of reinforcing the importance of that collaborative partnership, goal setting and action planning, and feedback. So those are the 3 things. So what I would like to share with you, and then the next few minutes that I have, are 2 tools that we have adapted in this virtual environment to support our coaches. So the first tool is, and if we click, I think it'll bring it up for us. Yeah, there we go. So the first tool is actually our teacher coach agreement. That is something that we've always had in North Carolina, how we start to plan that collaborative partnership from the very beginning. But what we've done here is we've adapted that second page where it really gets into the planning for some just practical things to consider when coaching in a remote environment. So you'll see there in blue, there's some prompts. This is also in your session materials. How will the teacher be observed? Like these are things that we didn't have to think about before. Is that face to face? Is it synchronous with a virtual observation? Is it asynchronous? What does that look like, right? Also, questions or prompts such as if we're using video recording, how will observations be shared? Which we're going to share some resources in our session today on that. But these are real questions that our practice-based coaches and teachers really had to talk about and figure out as part of building that collaborative partnership. Also, what will the process be for reviewing that recording? Will they view it together? Will the teacher review it first? Will they reflect on it? How does that look? So all of those things are there for you to consider if you're thinking about building this into your virtual coaching supports. And then the other thing I wanted to just quickly bring your attention to is a remote learning checklist. Thanks, Katie. On that checklist, this is one we did not invent. We actually adapted it, and it was adapted from the practice implementation checklist for high quality environments. So it will look familiar. Again, I wish there was some magic thing we had to share, but really it's about knowing what we thought in North Carolina is that we knew for sure that beginning of year TPOTs were probably not going to happen in our state. Many of our districts were 100% virtual, and those who had a hybrid situation going on, the coaches were still limited as to their access to the classroom because districts were just limiting the number of adults in the classroom, right? I mean, that was just the world we were in. So this checklist was really designed as a tool to be used to leverage that partnership. The coach can use data that they've previously collected on the teacher's instructional practices, and really they can use this to think about and assist with their shared goal and action planning. So those are just two resources that we wanted to share, and you'll see that they're organized by those pyramid practices that you already are probably familiar with. So we can, so that I just wanted to share that. Also wanted to say again, just a plug in for how those essential supports and that system framework really helps us to leverage what's already in place. So I think I'm running out of time. So we can shift quickly to kind of where we've landed in North Carolina and what our next steps are. So we are currently in the process of planning for our second semester. Early on, we planned out through January, and now we're taking a look at the spring and beyond. And we are at a place that we know that there's some opportunities that have come up for us to start to adapt our PD from a virtual offering, from a face-to-face offering to some virtual options, because we feel like some component of virtual coaching is here to stay. So we will start to work on adapting those offerings. They're also available on our website. I put a link there in the chat. All of our offerings are there and they're free access for anyone who wants to use them. We are also very aware of the dual pandemics that our nation is facing. So as we begin to shift our products, we're also taking this as an opportunity to really start to think about and ensure that we intentionally embed racial equity frameworks into everything we do, from how we select coaches, support them, and how we're able to sustain practices in North Carolina. We're also mindful of how we support the learning of our coaches as they are learning and leading others. We've had this thing where we say, we are building this road as we are driving on it. And at times that is very scary. So we want to make sure that we are supporting our coaches as they support and lead others. And a lot of that has to do with their own self-care. So we're very intentional to focus and add aspects of how they are doing into all of our offerings, because social emotional learning isn't just good for children, it's also good for adults as well. As a state, we are committed to continuing to receive input and resources from the National Center of Pyramid Model Innovations. We are signed up and we'll be on that webinar on November 4th, so hopefully we'll see some familiar faces on that. And also, the other thing that we have landed on is that it is time for us to start to explore the use of technologies in our state. So we're going to begin to venture into looking at technologies such as Swivel and OWL to help support virtual observations. So with that, I'm going to stop because I'm going to pass it to Ted, and he's going to be able to talk a lot more about how they've incorporated these tools into their practices.
Thank you, Katasha. Hello, everybody. Good to have you all with us today. As we've been going through the beginning of this session, I'm a little concerned. My internet's been a little unstable, so hopefully we won't have any problems, but I just wanted to provide a quick heads up. I'd also like to say that Dr. Strain regretfully cannot join us today, but he sends his best to all of you. He was just going to do kind of a quick introduction to the work that we do at the Pele Center around coaching. And so we will go ahead and start with that. So the Pele Center, the Positive Early Learning Experiences Center, we're at the University of Denver, and we work across a number of projects that are all things that I'm sure you've heard of, including the pyramid model and NCPMI, the LEAP preschool model, which is an inclusive preschool model for young children with autism and their typical peers, the Prevent, Teach, and Reinforce for Young Children initiative, and the ECTA Inclusion Institute, or Inclusion Initiative. And the work that we do really supports coaching at two levels. We provide support directly to programs, districts, and providers around the pyramid model and a new iteration of the pyramid model, kind of pyramid model version 2.0, which is what we're calling the Instructionally Enhanced Pyramid Model, IEPM. And this is a merging of all of the foundational classroom practices that are part of the pyramid model and that focus on children's social emotional development, with the added layer of really looking at intensive intervention strategies for young children with developmental disabilities. And we're really trying to bring those strategies together with the inclusion of the Prevent, Teach, and Reinforce for Young Children model of supporting children with high intensity, challenging behaviors as well. So with LEAP and with the pyramid model and IEPM, we engage in direct coaching of classroom providers and classroom teams and to programs as a whole. We also do a lot of work where we're providing direct coaching to coaches. So Katasha talked a little bit about in North Carolina, how they work with coaches and provide support to coaches. We also do a good deal of that work, again, around these same initiatives, LEAP, PTRYC, in particular in Minnesota, where we're supporting coaches' utilization of the PTRYC model, through NCPMI and through the ECTA Inclusion Initiative. And most of the work where we're providing support to coaches is around, obviously, initial training events, but really through working with coaches, very similar to what Katasha talked about, and that is providing meetings for coaches, monthly meetings, where coaches have an opportunity to get together and share information, share strategies, share lessons that they're learning as they engage in this new and different world of coaching during a pandemic. And a lot of what we're doing now and what we've been doing since March of last spring is significantly different than how we have historically provided our coaching support, whether to states, school districts, Head Start agencies, regional service districts, or providers. Most of our coaching efforts historically have been live and in person. We would be visiting programs, visiting classrooms, working directly with teams and with coaches. And then also we did do some of that work around monthly coaching calls for coaches, but really the majority of our work was direct and hands-on, live in person. So we have had to do a real left turn in terms of changing how we look at our coaching services and what we have been providing. So next slide, please. This really started with looking at the agencies that we were working with and asking some tough questions that most programs didn't have answers to because of the nature of where we are right now. So we were trying to get ideas around how are programs going to be doing service delivery and what is that going to look like? Is it going to be remote? Is it going to be a hybrid model? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to involve reducing class sizes or doing cohorts of kids? And the reality is that the answers to these questions are really fluid and constantly changing in this day and age. So this really required a really high level of flexibility on our part. Really, the only known right now for us is that we're not going to be there. We are not going to be traveling and working with people live and in person. So as they started to answer these questions, we were able to start thinking about how we were going to best be able to support programs. In addition to those initial questions, we had to start thinking about what kinds of guidelines were going to be put in place that were specific to COVID and what impact this might have in coaching. Through a lot of our work with LEAP and with the pyramid model, we have a really big emphasis on teaching social skills. And a big part of teaching social skills is getting kids to connect with each other. And how was that going to change, right? How are classroom practices going to change around shared materials and meal times and arrival routines? So we knew that there were going to be some programmatic changes related to COVID guidelines that we were going to have to adapt to. And we also recognized that these were likely going to be different in every agency, program, school district, or state that we worked in. So again, requiring a lot of flexibility on our part to support our coaches and to support our coaching efforts. And we knew that that was going to be a real challenge for us. And then finally, asking questions about technology and what kinds of technology platforms programs and districts and agencies were going to be using, and how really digging into how these different platforms might be able to support our coaching efforts. So were they going to invest in hardware that could be used like Swivel or OWL, as Katasha mentioned? Were they going to invest in platforms that support coaching, like the Coaching Companion that we'll hear a little bit about in our next segment? And what were these things going to look like, and how could we utilize them to facilitate our coaching? So through the spring and into the summer, we were doing a lot of legwork and having a lot of conversations and discussions with our coachees in our districts to try to determine what was going to work best for them. And while every agency that we talked to was going to be different, and we recognized that, one real commonality across all of them was that time was going to be a real factor. We knew that with a pandemic going on, teachers and practitioners' time was going to be even more pressed than it normally is. And we know that time is always a factor when it comes to coaching. But we needed to recognize that whether we were doing remote learning or in-person learning, having to, clean classrooms between sessions or at the end of days, we needed to put an emphasis on still setting aside time for coaching. Coaching doesn't happen without time dedicated for all of these components of the practice-based coaching model to happen. So when we're thinking about systems issues related to coaching, time is one of those constant issues that we need to be thinking about and planning for. Next slide, please. So as we moved through the spring and into the summer and started talking with our partners, one of the realizations that we came to was that we weren't going to be live. We knew that. And one of the things that came out of these discussions was going to be the importance of building these coaching partnerships with our partners. So Katie showed the graphic of practice-based coaching at the beginning of this presentation. And there are those three components that are foundational to practice-based coaching, right? Shared goals and action planning, focused observations, and reflection and feedback. But all of those things happen within the context of a collaborative partnership. And one of the things that we recognized as we went remote back in the spring and started to ramp up for this school year is that building those coaching relationships was going to be a real challenge. When we're on site with our partners, we have opportunities to engage in a lot of informal conversation, beginning of the day, between sessions, at the end of the day, as we're beginning coaching and ending our coaching meetings. And as everything went remote, we found that we were losing all of this informal conversation with our partners and with our teams, and that it was very, and needed to be, very agenda driven. We had things that we needed to do. We got online and did our observations, and we got offline, and we got back online for our virtual meetings, and we got offline, and we were missing those opportunities to connect. So as we've started this school year, we've really put an emphasis on these three C's. First and foremost, connecting with our teams, whether they're coaches or whether they're practitioners, spending time to share information and talk to them outside of kind of that coaching bubble so that we can really work on that collaborative partnership. Two is just to collaborate and to make sure that even when we're limited on time and we have an agenda of questions that we need to ask and feedback that we need to provide, that we listen to our partners. And one of the things that we, again, discovered back in the spring is that there was so much that was unknown. Sometimes our partners just needed to take a deep breath and have an opportunity to share what was on their mind. And so we had to really listen and collaborate with them and then celebrate. And celebrating, obviously, is always important. Next slide, please. So we've really kind of talked about this already, but in getting started, we are spending a lot of time having conversations and building that partnership, building that relationship. and giving them opportunities to debrief around whatever initial training events that we happen related to whatever initiative you might be coaching towards, right? And then thinking about where we are in the process. Are these partners that we worked with last year and that we're carrying over, and what could we carry over? Are these new partners that we need to start from the beginning with, and what that was going to look like? And again, really spending time to try to listen to our partners, our coachees, and hear about what they were struggling with, whether they were COVID related or classroom related or other, and try to turn those things into action plan goals. Next slide. So getting into the coaching, we really talked with our partners a lot about leveraging technology, whether they were in kind of simple technology solutions like Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meets, whether we were going to invest in coaching hardware like Swivel or Owl, or coaching software like the Coaching Companion. We had to come up with a best solution, right, for every partner. And every coach and coachee partnership is going to be different. And every district is using different technology. And so we had to be flexible. And so we've come up with kind of low-tech solutions and high-tech solutions. And one of the things that we realized is just using Zoom, we can set up multiple cameras in a classroom or multiple camera angles and really get a good picture of what's going on in the classroom. So if you go to the next slide, this is just a screenshot of a classroom, a virtual classroom observation, where we've got an iPad and a laptop that are in the same Zoom meeting. So a coach could have two views of what's going on in the classroom. And this is really valuable at times like a large group time where we want to see what the teacher is doing, but we also want to see how the kids are responding. So some really simple technology solutions like that were really valuable. And that's without making real investments in hardware and software. So next slide. And we'll just wrap up by saying another thing that we found is documentation is crucially important. So Katasha talked about modifying coaching agreements to fit within a virtual coaching reality, utilizing coaching logs and feedback forms, whether you're doing feedback live in Zoom meetings or you're using email or you're using the Coaching Companion, really making sure that we're utilizing our documentation so that we have detailed evidence or data around what we've been coaching to, areas of progress and areas of need, and what's going on within that coaching cycle, from developing those shared goals and action plans to our observations and our reflection in feedback meetings. Last slide, please. And this is just an example of that virtual coaching cycle. We're meeting with the team provider or provider. We start off by debriefing around those training events and establishing initial goals and action plans. We're figuring out, and I mean figuring out, ways to do those virtual observations via remote technology, whether they're again, as Katasha mentioned, whether they're synchronous or asynchronous, so live, or they're recorded and we're watching them after the fact. And then making sure that we're following that practice-based coaching cycle and engaging in that reflection and feedback meeting as well. And doing that in whatever means we can, whether it's via phone or Zoom or email or using a tool like the Coaching Companion. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Susan Sandall and Leslie Janes, and they're going to talk to you more about the Coaching Companion.
Thank you, Ted. And hello, everyone. Leslie Janes and I are going to talk to you about the Coaching Companion, and I thank my previous speakers who've alluded to that. Before I get started, I also want to let you know that before this session is over, you're going to get a chance to share, and you're also going to get an opportunity to ask questions. So if you have some questions already, or things that you need some clarification on, make sure that you make a note of that, because you will have an opportunity to ask some questions of all of us. So with that, let me talk about the Coaching Companion. And it is a web-based tool that provides a framework to organize and support coaching and coaching systems. The Coaching Companion was developed here at the University of Washington at a center called the Early Edu Alliance. The tool is primarily a video sharing and feedback app that can be used to improve coaching practice, as well as improve teaching and other intervention practices, with, of course, the expectation that improvement in those practices will lead to improved child and/or family outcomes. And as you can see here, as indicated by our use of the graphic, it's aligned with the practice-based coaching framework. And it can be used in person, and important to us today, it can be used remotely and has been used quite successfully in a remote way. We launched the Coaching Companion in 2014, but it's really been in the last couple of years that we've worked with a number of states and other kinds of systems, regions, and so forth. And that experience in working with states and with other organizations and systems has really helped us improve the product, improve the platform. The feedback has helped us refine the basic standard features of the tool. And it's also helped us to identify and customize features that can support implementation of coaching, and also implement features that can be used for reporting purposes. So some of you may be particularly interested in that kind of component of coaching when you're thinking about a statewide or a system-wide approach. So Leslie is going to talk about the features and the functions in far more specificity. So I'm going to turn it over to her. Leslie?
Thanks, Susan. And I'm seeming to have a little bit of glitching on my internet also. So if you can't hear me, someone please say something. But which is odd enough for me to say, since the Coaching Companion is a web-based platform and you have to have the internet to use it. So we all know how many people in a home having to use the internet at one time can sometimes create some challenges right now. But we really believe that the Coaching Companion can help support coaching currently, the way many programs are engaging in coaching, but also when, even if we think about the old days when we could have coaches in the classroom and working with teachers, and really being able to use the Coaching Companion to support self-reflection and support building that ability for a teacher to see themselves in practice and reflect on their own practices to improve how they're teaching children and how they're improving outcomes for children. So what you see right here is the homepage of the Coaching Companion. The site is mobile friendly so that it can shrink and morph to whatever device you're using. So on the left-hand side of the screen, you see what the desktop version looks like, and then the right-hand side are what it looks like from a phone or a tablet. So the site is touchscreen friendly and mobile friendly, and that's so important right now because we have so many practitioners who are using tablets in their classrooms or in their learning environments to not only capture child assessment data, but also capture video to be able to document that child assessment data and document their own teaching practices. So the great thing about the platform is that you can record on a device that you might be using in your classroom and upload it directly from that tablet or mobile device. As Susan said, that the Coaching Companion is built on the practice-based coaching framework. We really value the importance of that collaborative partnership and try and make the site as transparent as possible so that every participant in a coaching partnership knows all of the details that are going on within that partnership. So if you have a coach and a teacher that are working together as a dyad, they can see that they're the only two people that can see the communication back and forth and the sharing of resources of that partnership. And if they want to add someone like a mental health consultant or a disabilities coordinator or a supervisor to be able to give input into the coaching that is happening in the classroom, it's always known who else might be participating in those partnerships. Another great way to be able to incorporate some of the inclusive practices is that you can have some of those experts that support children with disabilities be able to engage in coaching with the coach and the coachee or with teachers directly and support how teachers are working with children that might have special learning needs or special physical needs that they need some help trying to figure out in classrooms. So we build out that practice-based coaching cycle by creating shared goals and action plan steps. The shared goals are often created from some of those needs assessments that the teachers engage in or class reports or ECHRS and ITERS reports. So all of those materials and supporting documentation can be uploaded to the site, and the coach and coachee can then determine together where they want to build their goals and how they want to then break those goals down into actionable steps, which they can then either get more information about what that practice might look like by watching an exemplar, watching a training video, reading an article, and then be able to practice on their own. And then the teacher can engage in the final step, which would be a focused observation. With the action plan steps, as I said, you can upload many different resources. You can upload resources directly from your computer. So if you have a series of resources that you're using around the pyramid model or around any other set of practices that a coach or a specialist might be working with teachers on, you can upload those resources directly into action plan steps or into the site and be able to create your own specialized library within the Coaching Companion. You also have access to the Cultivate Learning Media Library that we have curated over the past decade or so, which has about 1,600 different exemplar videos, trainings, interviews, and different materials that we've gathered and developed to support the improved practices of educators in their learning environments. You can also, when we have each of our customized sites, each site can create its own resource library materials. So in the state of Washington, we can have specialized materials in that site that are only for Washington coaches or Washington providers. If we are working with a pyramid project specifically, we can upload those resources directly so that they're always available to anyone that has access to the site. So once we've created all of the action plan steps, we would then move into that focused observation. And focused observations are really the opportunity for those providers to be able to capture the practice that they've been working on, capture the goal that they want to improve on in their learning environment, and share that with their coach for reflection and feedback. The focused observation has the ability to capture the date and the exact thing that they're working on within the classroom. So as you can see in the middle screen, you can see that there's a provider working with a couple of children in a tower of blocks. This gives the provider the opportunity to say, we're working on some fine motor skills by stacking blocks or math skills by looking at the different shapes of the blocks and how they stack on top of each other, or height or distance that they're spanning among the blocks. Or the provider could say, what I'm really working on here is getting these two children to play together and really build those social emotional skills that they both need to work on, and really showing how I'm using this activity to help the children build their friendships and build their collaborative play working together in this video. So it gives that provider the opportunity to be able to really put that focus around what they want the coach to give them feedback around. You can upload, as I said before, you can upload a focused observation from a phone or tablet directly from the library of whatever the device is that you're using. And you can then be able to have that provider and the coach look at this piece of documentation together and be able to reflect and have conversations around what they're seeing together. So after we upload the focused observation, we then would engage in reflection and feedback. And as you can see here, there's lots of different ways to be able to have conversations around that focused observation. The coaching companion allows you to play a video and stop the video at different points that you see different practices happening and make comments as the video is playing. So you can stop the video and tag it as many times as you want when you see a great interaction happening, or when you might see a missed opportunity. And it allows the coach and the coachee to be able to watch that themselves and give some reflections, and then have dialogue, have a virtual dialogue around what they're seeing and how they might have been very successful, or how they might have seen things that they could have done differently, and discuss that. So it really allows that teacher not only to be able to see themselves in action and be able to reflect on it themselves, but then have that conversation with the coach. You know, in traditional times, when the coach was sitting in the back of the classroom and they were watching what was happening in the classroom and then engaging in a feedback session later, the teacher would have to think back about what happened during the time when they were in the classroom and be able to have that conversation based on what the coach's notes said. This actually allows the coach and the coachee to rewatch that interaction and that moment and be able to reflect on it as it's happening. So it's really important for the teachers to be able to watch themselves in action and be able to develop those self-reflection abilities, to be able to see what they did, exactly what they did well, and exactly where they might want to make some changes or tweaks to what they might have planned, or how they might have reacted. And as you can see with the different colored heads on the different comments, is you can have that back and forth exchange directly on the platform. So you can ask questions, you can respond, and you can really have that dialogue within the reflection and feedback. The Coaching Companion also has community of practice groups, where you can build in any type of group that you've been working with, or maybe it's coaches that all want to talk about how they're moving from in-person to virtual coaching. Maybe it's a group of practitioners that are working on the same practice. Maybe it's a group of directors that really want to think about how they're supporting their teachers in improving their teaching practices during COVID, where everyone's wearing masks, or anything that they might want to be able to engage in discussion around. It's a less formal grouping of providers, or grouping of educators, or grouping of anyone that's on the site. And it gives you the ability to not only share resources back and forth, but then have those discussions around resources that are shared. So as Susan said, we've tried building the Coaching Companion with lots of different groups around the country. We're actually now just launching our 11th version of the Coaching Companion. And these have all been built based on customized requests from either states or systems that are really trying to figure out how they can organize their coaching and document their coaching in different ways. So we have currently 4 states that are using the site. We have 2 different statewide PD systems. We have 2 school districts. We have 1 university partnership, and we have 2 training and technical assistance providers. Each of them having coaching systems that they wanted to be able to figure out how they could engage with providers maybe because of COVID and needing to go into a virtual coaching, but also we have lots of states that have lots of geography. And so it's a way for coaches to really be able to span more geography in less time and really work with more providers in a more efficient way. We also, at the University of Washington, developed the Head Start Coaching Companion, which is a free version of the Coaching Companion available to any early childhood program across the country and offered through the Office of Head Start Early Childhood Learning and Knowledge Center. So what we've learned from all of these different versions of the Coaching Companion is that, first of all, you need a system for coaching. So the Coaching Companion isn't itself a system for coaching. It's a framework that supports a system that's already in place. So we really talk to different projects around what their system is and how the site is going to support that system. The site needs a champion. So the same way that that coaching is effective in a program is because you have those early adopters and you have those coaches that really want to make it work. So having a champion who can really advocate for getting people on board and using it and continuing to use the tool is really important. You also need some of the practical supports, like the time and opportunity to get to know the site in practice, to build relationships between the coach and coachee before they start engaging in uploading videos with children around them and lots of other things that could go wrong. So we often encourage them to start with a picture to upload and get to know each other a little bit by sharing pictures, or take a video without children in the classroom and upload that video first. Also, having familiarity with the technology and access to internet is important, and having that stable internet connection so that you can upload those videos efficiently. The last thing that we have noticed also is if there's any kind of incentive in a coaching system, makes the coaching project more successful. And that seems kind of obvious, but if you can get credit for coaching, a lot of our state systems are now really recognizing coaching as a valuable form of professional development. So being able to get professional development credit for coaching is a great incentive to make coaches and coachees continue to use that site and continue to engage in that interaction with each other. So when as we've worked with all of these sites, and each site having a different challenge or problem that they're really trying to address with building a coaching companion, we have started thinking about how we can build additional features into the coaching companion. So some of the new features that we've heard are really needed in the site that we are now building in and offering to the customized coaching companion sites would be video trackers. So you can really see if you've shared a video with a practitioner around a best practice, have they watched it? Did they watch it all the way to the end? And did they make any comments on it? When you've got coaches and coachees working together, are they completing their goals, or are they stopping in the middle of a goal and getting distracted and creating some new goal because of a new priority? And so how many goals are being completed, and how long does it take to complete a goal? And in some of our sites, we're having them create and complete goals at different proficiencies. So are they completing a goal at a beginning level or at a mastery level? These different ways to complete goals and collect all of that documentation can then feed into monitoring and reporting. So we can create lots of different reports on usage of the site and interactions between coaches and coachees from what we're gathering with their interactions on the site. And then we're building in some training modules. We're really looking at how we can use job-embedded learning opportunities to support training and really help practitioners take what they're learning in training and then demonstrate what they've learned in activities in their classroom. And then the final thing, kind of like what Ted was talking about, is video conferencing. We know that the interactions and the uploading of video is important, and that virtual back and forth is a great way to document the coaching, but that relationship building is also really important, and being able to see each other face to face every now and then also helps you realize that there are people involved and that you can have those relationships even if you can't go into the classroom. So we're building in a video conferencing tool within the site so that once you're looking at a video together, you can say, well, let's hop on a video conference and really talk about what we've seen and talk about how we want to plan for next steps or plan for new goals. I think that's all of my presentation videos, and I think we're right on time. So I hope that that this was all really informative. We've really enjoyed the flow of this presentation because it kind of takes you from the state system and gets really down to how we're making it work. So I'm going to pass it back to Katie to talk about our breakouts.
Thanks so much, Leslie. And thanks to everyone for hanging in. We know we shared a lot of content with you up front, but we wanted you to have these details from each of our presenters before we head into a breakout discussion. So our plan will be to break you all into small groups to address these 3 questions. And you'll have 15 minutes for that. And then we'll come back together and do a large group Q&A with the presenters, asking them some specific questions regarding the content that they shared, or questions around challenges you're having, or infrastructure supports you're trying to put in place within your systems. So here are our questions. We'd like to encourage you first to introduce yourselves to one another, just share which state you are coming from and what your role is there. We'd like you to share what's the vision or identified purpose for distance or virtual coaching for your system, and how has that been communicated across your system? What infrastructure supports are you considering or have you implemented? And what challenges does your system continue to have with distance or virtual coaching? Katasha has put those questions in the chat, and those will travel with you to your breakouts. We'll have about 15 minutes, and we'll come together at about 20 after the hour. Thanks so much, Roxanne, for putting us into groups. Well, we wanted to take some time at the end of the presentation to allow you guys to ask the presenters any questions that you have for them, or maybe something that came up in your small group that you'd like to pose, to see if there's any sort of scenarios that we might want to address. As you're thinking, we'd be curious to know the extent to which you're considering integrating your coaching work, particularly your distance or remote coaching work, across regular early childhood programs. So sort of integrating that, across systems. Does anyone have any examples of that, or questions about how to approach that, if that's something you're considering?
Well, this is Anne in Illinois. In my group, we all were kind of learning more today than anything else. So we haven't technically put a lot of this out. So from that perspective of going across early childhood systems, Illinois has started our work to implement the pyramid model, finally, after how many years since we helped invent it, but whatever. So we started with the early childhood education programs, and are starting to reach out now we're using our PDG 0 to 5 grant as well as part of this, to bring in early intervention and home visiting, and hopefully childcare. So we do have across the board. My hope out of this coaching and practice coaching stuff was to learn more about maybe what it's going to be, what it's going to look like for early intervention, because I'm still just a little bit going to the pyramid model meetings I'm still a little confused a bit, maybe. I have our professional development people on board as well, and we're there to support anything. We're still just trying to see how it really fits for us exactly, so we can help develop those offerings for our professionals to help implement this as well. The whole virtual thing came up, obviously. We kind of got forced into it during the pandemic. We'd never done any virtual work with our families before, really, through practice. But I did mention that we've been using some filming of sessions for professional development purposes for early intervention. We've been doing some peer review type stuff for fidelity checks. More recently, it ramped up a lot with SIP, but we've been doing it for a while. So learning a lot, but yes, trying to get this across all early childhood is going to take a good effort. It's a big state, and so having to figure that out is always hoping to hear some good information to help share.
Thanks, Anne. That's great to hear that you're taking that on in such a comprehensive way. I was wondering if we had other Part C colleagues who have moved forward with implementing practice-based coaching, and sort of any thoughts to share with Anne about things to consider with this model. I think something that comes up that I've heard with systems that we've been working with, Anne, is with that classroom, you have your sort of identified population, and yet so for early intervention, it's sort of what's the program, right? In terms of do you have established IFSP teams, or do you have practitioners crossing, we're working with different families? So the extent to which you can sort of organize that work and thinking about the coaching and targeting, working on those practices, say with targeted teams. But there definitely is some planning and infrastructure that needs to go into thinking about some of those variables, I think.
Exactly. And we did discuss a little bit the fact that for me, for Illinois early intervention, that when the pandemic hit, we went to some virtual for the first time. We've always said that the early intervention program is all about coaching. We are there to help coach the parent to understand how they can work with their child. That's right. Well, then, here comes the virtual world, and I'm getting lots of calls from parents going, I don't understand. I don't know how to do this. The provider's always done this for me. And it hurt, just hurt to hear that. So, lessons learned that maybe we weren't holding people to the fire as well as we should have. But, again, learning from those experiences and moving forward. We did put out a training very quickly for early interventionists to watch about using telehealth. We call it live video visits here, but it just kind of helps to show them that practice of coaching should still be done even virtually. So
yeah,
hoping it helped.
Thanks, Anne. Is there another question from the group that you'd like to share?
So this is Kathy from New Hampshire.
Hey, Kathy.
Type C coordinator. Just one thing I wanted to mention when Anne was talking was that one of the things that we always have to think about, or we always do think about in New Hampshire, is the framework around the coaching and what does the model look like. So for example, initially it was, we were given a model that coaches were supposed to meet on a weekly basis. Well, in early intervention, that doesn't often work, especially if you're not seeing the family every week. And then are you giving the practitioner time to practice what you have been talking about in your coaching sessions in between? It's not like being in a classroom on a daily basis and you have every day to practice that. What we had done in New Hampshire was we just changed that model a little bit to be that the coaches need to meet on a monthly basis, coachee, which that gave them time in between to practice what they were trying to be working on.
Thanks, Kathy. Great. Okay, well, let's move into, we'd love for you each to enter into the chat one key takeaway that you're taking from today. Maybe it's a topic or content that you want to follow up on further, or someone you want to connect with that shared something interesting that you'd like to learn more about. Any kind of takeaway that you have from today. Texas Family Flyer on telehealth. Thanks, Anne. The coaching companion. Great, Christina. Something to be thinking about that came up in our small group is your Head Start partners, and remembering that they have free access to the coaching companion. So the extent to which you could potentially explore a partnership with them about how their use of the tool is going, and maybe potentially pilot in some type of way with your coaches to see how that fit might go for your program. Thanks, Kathy. I see supporting coaches to meet together. All right, keep those takeaways coming. A couple things I wanted to remind you guys about. One is to please complete the evaluation for this session. You can find it in Cvent in the link that you have for this session. It's at the bottom. If you scroll down and you'll see this survey icon. If you click there and share your feedback, we'd be grateful. Also, you'll notice there's documents on this page. So there you'll find the PowerPoint and the handouts Katasha was referring to earlier in the session. And lastly, we want to thank you for your time, your energy, and your questions and your ideas. This is the contact information for each of the presenters. We welcome hearing from you if you have a follow-up question that you'd like to pose. And we wish you all the best. Great continued participation in the conference. The next session, I believe, is starting at 3:30 Eastern, so you have an hour break between now and then. And we hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks very much.